Darkness kills, destroys the will. Find a spark, make hearts thrill. Hear the tales of time so grim. Shine a light, don't let it dim. Heather Brown downtown, bound. True crime story she's found. In the shadows, secret stay. Need a light that finds the way.
Welcome back to the second part of Defeating the Darkness, True Crime Stories with Downtown Heather Brown and Judge King. If you didn't listen to the first episode, which was the last episode, you got to stop the tape and go back and listen to the backstory of our amazing guest, who's here to follow up and finish telling us this amazing story in honor of Veterans Day of his experience in the Vietnam War. He's a combat veteran, and he's here, and he's in the middle of a riveting story about how he was over in Da Nang. Am I saying it right? Yes. Da Nang. And you had been moved with your, I don't want to say platoon because it wasn't platoon.
A detachment.
A detachment. And you were doing some quarry crushing.
That's right.
To make stone and build a bigger highway for Highway 1 over in Vietnam. And there had been some previous, what's the word? Gunfire that you had gone through.
Attacks.
Yeah, attacks on you and the rest of your comrades over there. And so tell us where you are when you're like building this road and you're getting there.
Again, thanks for having me. The Seabees, their logo that we talked about, we build, we fight. What the Seabees don't do, they don't go out on patrols. That's what the Marines do. That's what the Army does. But we construct, we build. But if attack, we fight back. And so during that time that we were developing the quarry crusher operation to widen Highway 1, the main convoy route to go from Da Nang up to the demilitarized zone, also known as the DMZ, we did have attacks. And when that happens, we get assigned fighting positions. They're assigned to us before the attack. So our weapons primarily are the M16, not the M14 that we used in boot camp or in military training, but the M16. And we have machine guns, M50 caliber and M60s. We have M79 grenade launchers, which looks like a shortened version of a shotgun, only it breaks in half and a grenade goes in. You close it and you fire it and you lob. And it's basically like what you do with a hand grenade. Those are very important because when you get attacked and there is some obstacles between the attacker and you can lob these things over the obstacle. The other thing we have were mortars. And if I could just take a moment to explain that to you. A mortar team consists of 5 to 6 individuals. It's a tube. A projectile is placed on the top and it's let go, and gravity propels it down to the firing pin, and then it is then shot out, just like a rifle that has a firing pin, only it's gravity. And you have a section on the top of the mortar tube that the mortar team leader, after every round is fired, does a little click so that when the next round is fired, it doesn't land in the same place. So what it does, it walks in. So when you are attacking, you are walking in. Otherwise, you're just going to have a big hole. The enemy has the same. They have the same, and they have the same dynamics. And so when you're under attack, the rounds are walking in. And one of the things that you learn early on when you come under attack is the whistling sound. And what you develop, I don't ask me the physiology of it, the physicalness of it, but you learn after one or two attacks that you know the sound of the round coming. You just do. It's breaking through the air, but you can't see it. And when the sound passes over you, involuntarily, there's a sense of relief in your body because you know you're not going to get hit with it. And that's especially true if you're in a foxhole and you're under attack and the rounds are coming in and then they go past you. And I think I want to demonstrate that or talk about that because we were under attack, half a dozen times during this 2-month process. But what's important is that the enemy, they have the mortars and they have the rockets. And so they use those weapons like we do when we try to repel when we become under attack. Mm-hmm. So on the night of March 30th of 1968, 2 Marine tanks came into our camp. These were 8-inch tanks. That's what they call them. They're howitzers. And that is, I believe, the diameter of the barrel of the tank. It's big. It fires a 200-pound projectile with pinpoint accuracy up to 20 miles.
Wow. In
the eyes of the enemy, it is a deadly, deadly weapon. And it can inflict a lot of casualties. And this is all before cell phones. This is all before, I'm sure there were satellites up there. But when the support was called in for the 8-inch tanks, it was all by grids, and they were pretty accurate. But the important thing is, in the eyes of the enemy, that piece of machinery can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, like these Marines are about to open up a can on us, right?
It's a very good way to put it because what I'm about ready to describe to you. So these 2 tanks came into our camp, and at about 8 o'clock at night, 4 miles up the road was a bridge. And the bridge was being guarded by a platoon and a half maybe of Marines. And they were in charge of the security of the bridge. About 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, the bridge, the camp where the Marines were, came under a very intense attack by, once again, a combination of VC and NVA forces. Estimates were between 200 to 300. And it was an intense battle. It was mortars. It was satchel charges. There were reports that they're inside the wire, which means they have breached the security of the camp. And so what the Marines did, they called in for the support of the 2 8-inch tanks, and they provided support. And they suppressed the attack along with these Marines who were fighting back. And so the battle was suppressed momentarily. But about 2 o'clock in the morning on March 31st, a second attack occurred on the bridge. But before the attack on the bridge, the enemy sent mortar and rocket teams in the hills above our camp.
Uh-oh.
And they coordinated an attack, a mortar and a rocket attack on the guns, the 8-inch tanks, and at the same time, now a second assault on the bridge. And I'm in my hooch, and my good buddy Herbie Schilling, I'm sleeping. And he yells, incoming, and we run out. And when you run out, you grab your helmet, your M16, your clothes, and you go to your fighting position. And our fighting position was on the northwest part of the camp. And it happened to be right next to that 8-inch tank that the enemy is trying to disable by lobbing rounds in. And so I am in an open hole, and rounds are coming in, and there was nothing I could do but sit in this hole as this attack is going on. Now, once again, didn't last long, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but it was enough that you were just, I don't want to say saying prayer. You're just, is the next one for me? Is the next one for me? Because if it lands, it's over. Remember the mortar teams I told you about? Our mortar teams?
Yeah.
They're on duty 24/7 in the camp. And as soon as the attack started, they fought back. And they wiped out the enemy mortar and rocket teams.
Oh, wow.
Suppressed the attack. But enough rounds got in that there were about 8 Seabees that were severely wounded, one who later died. So right after the attack, Pappy Scott, the World War II veteran Seabee I told you about,
Yeah.
they're checking, everybody okay? And then he says, we need volunteers in the battle aid station to help the corpsmen with the wounded. Okay, now my friend Herbie had already gone someplace else. I couldn't get my hand up fast enough because I wanted to get away from that 8-inch tank.
Right.
Because if there was another attack, and so whatever you want to say, I mean, I wanted to get into a safe place.
Yeah.
All right? So I go down, and the corpsman is treating the wounded, and there was one, and as I indicated, he later passed, but he had a very severe head wound, and he was unconscious, and I was assigned to take care of him. And he was a young man my age out of Philadelphia. I didn't know him, but I was just, changing his Band-Aid, and then he'd go into convulsions, and the only thing I knew to do was to hug him. That's...
Yeah.
Okay, I'm 20 years old. I mean, and then, we go, and I help with the orderly duties of the others. And then at about 8 o'clock in the morning, I was told we got medevacs coming in, which are helicopters. And I was told to go outside and get ready because we were going to get the wounded from the battle aid station onto the helicopter. And I'm outside, and all of a sudden, we're under attack again.
Oh, my gosh.
And the helicopter, it's unclear. Reports are that it got shot down or that it crashed, but it wasn't there. And now we're under a second attack. And I'm outside with others, and we can see up on the hill the flashes. The 8-inch guns are firing, and then the mortar teams are firing, okay? And then the rounds for one particular mortar team started to walk in. And it was so obvious that the object of that attack was that mortar team containing 6 Seabees. And everybody knew it. And as I reflect back, they knew it. They knew it. And they held their position because it was their job to defend our camp. And they kept on firing back. And they took 2 direct hits, and 5 were instantly killed, 2 who I knew, and 1 severely wounded. We got there, we got the severely wounded one, and then I and somebody else put the remains into body bags. And so that was the attack. That was the attack. And when the battle was done, this was the price. The bridge was still in the hands of the Marines. We still had our camp. But here was the price. Over 60 wounded from 2 camps, mostly Marines at the bridge. But 24 died.
Wow.
24. 15 Marines at the bridge, a corpsman who was assigned to the Marines, 2 Marines in the helicopter, and 6 Seabees at the camp.
Oh.
And I just want to take a moment, if I can, to talk to you about, who they were.
Yeah, I want to. That's exactly what I want.
All right, who they were. I mean, and we talk in our profession about diversity, which is a good thing. I mean, it is a good thing. And again, women were not allowed in camp combat, so obviously they were all males, but they were from different race. They are different ethnic backgrounds, and geographically, they were from our entire country. They were from the north. They were from Massachusetts. They were from Pennsylvania. They were from New Jersey, the South, Texas, Oklahoma. They were from the Midwest. They had Wisconsin, Iowa, and they had it from the West, New Mexico, California, and Hawaii. They were, it was geographically, they were diverse. They were diverse in the manner in which I said about who they were. But the one area that they were not diverse in was their age. Their average age was a little over 20 years old. I mean, if you can just sit back, and of course I've had this long life, but you sit back and you think about that. 2 years earlier, they were with their families being nurtured. And being nurtured has no economic barriers. Families nurture. And then 2 years later, they're returning fire or defending a bridge. And what that leaves with me, and we'll get to this part where I did find the relatives, is there's 2 things that about a war is one is how random it is. I mean, I was in an open pit. I could have been that young CB from Philadelphia. It could have been me. And number 2, as we will later describe, the impact of their family is forever until they die, until the family dies. So that was the battle. That was the battle. And we stayed in Vietnam there for another about a month and a half. And then it was time to go home. It was time to go home.
Now, did you already know when you were there, and now you've lost your friends, and there's all these wounded and soldiers that were killed? Did you have a date that you were going home?
Oh, yes. And that's one of the things that was a tradition in Vietnam. You knew when you were going. You knew the date you were flying out, even if it was in a unit.
Would you tick down on a little calendar?
Not only did that, you went out and bought a fifth of VO that had 30 shots and had a yellow ribbon around it. And every morning you'd take one shot, because that means you had 30 to go. And you put the yellow ribbon on, and people would see the yellow ribbon and they would ask you, how short are you? And you go 15 and a wake up. That's how you counted it.
15 and a wake up. Wow, that must have been crazy as you're just knowing. 13 and a wake up, 12 and a wake up, the countdown to get out of there.
To get out of there. So we convoyed out, went back to Phu, caught a C-130, which is, I think, the 2 engines or 4 engines. My age has caught up with me. I can't remember which one. But we flew into Da Nang. And we all expected that we were going to go back the way we came, and that is in that military gray, green jump seats with no windows, right? And we're at the airport, and we don't see it. And so somebody yells out to Pappy, where in the, you fill in the word. Mm-hmm. Where is it? And with a big grin, he turns and he points to a commercial airline. And as I've later read, they started to bring the troops back in commercial airlines. And he said, get your sea bags and go around the nose and drop your sea bags down. They'll put it in a cargo and then go up, whatever, it's the stairs. And so I'm with my good friend Herbie, and we're doing that, and he's in front of me. And as he gets around the nose, he screams. And I won't say what he said, but he screams. And I look up, and there are 2 stewardesses at the top. Okay? We're in our fatigues.
You've just been through hell and back.
And we come up the stairs, and I'll never forget, one of them looked right at me and said, "CB, you're going home." And I mean, it was just a very joyous moment. It was.
I can only imagine.
So we left. We stopped again in, I think, Hawaii this time. All right. And then came to California. And we were supposed to fly into Point Mugu, which is where we took off from. But it was soaked in with fog. That's what I recall. And they diverted us to Los Angeles LAX. This was on June 1st of 1968. It was the Saturday before the California primary for the presidential election of 1968. At this time, Lyndon Johnson, who was the president when I was in Vietnam the first time, announced that he was not going to seek re-election. Ironically, the day that he announced that he was not seeking re-election was March 31st, which is the day of the attack of our camp.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the putting this in a historical concept, right? Or perspective. And so we're in our fatigues. We are still dressed as if we were in the jungle in Vietnam. And we fly into LAX. And so here we are walking through the airport. I'm going to say this right now. I wasn't spit on. I wasn't called like a baby killer, things that you've read about. None of that occurred. But I just remember the sense of the hostility. And you compare that to a Super Bowl commercial that came out, 10, 15 years ago, Budweiser, where the troops are walking through the airport and everybody stands up and applause. Just visualize the 180-degree response. And I didn't know why. I mean, it was enough that I just didn't understand. As I now know and read, I do understand.
Yeah, but that must have been, just emotionally like devastating. Here you are fighting for your country, you're watching your friends die, you're putting your friends in body bags at, a war that you're fighting as a very young man, leaving your family, not knowing if you'll ever see them again. And when you finally get to come home, you're greeted with discontent or hostility. That must have been like, what is happening here? I'm imagining there's probably a ton of, veterans that have come home to a not so joyous reunion with people.
President Obama, I believe it was in 2008 or 2010 on Veterans Day, when he gave a speech at our memorial, I believe, he did indicate that he proclaimed Vietnam Veterans Day on a day. That was his proclamation. And he was quoted saying it was a national disgrace of how Vietnam veterans were treated when they came home. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I started college. But I just want to indicate those things that I mentioned that did not experience. But it was so apparent to me, the indifference, it had an impact on me.
I bet.
It really did. But anyway.
Well, let me back up for a second.
Yeah.
When you were over there in Vietnam and you were fighting for our country, were you in communication with your mom or with anyone else?
I'm glad that you brought that up. This was before cell phones. This is before internet. What you live for in Vietnam is mail call. Mail call. I mean, it was better than having a beer. Mail call, to get something and to read something from somebody who was close to you, friend, mother, girlfriend, you would read it. You would read it not once, but 2, 3, 4 times. And that is the highlight of the day.
Wow.
And so, yes, in answer to your question, you did. And it was just, you lived for that. That was like, having a child call you from college. That's what it was. And it was really something. And I have memories of that. And speaking of that, so when I got back, I had previously got an airline ticket to go see my mom and my 3 little sisters the Monday. Remember, we were back on Saturday. That was June 1st. Sunday was June 2nd. And then I had a ticket to go back to see my mom and my 3 sisters and my father on the 3rd. But I was free on the 2nd. And I had met a young woman before I went to Vietnam. We were friends, all right? But she wrote to me when I was in Vietnam, like the mail call that I'm telling you about. I mean, she did write. And it was very, very cool. Well, I called her up on Sunday morning, and she answered the phone. And her reaction to me was not like the airport. Oh, I'm glad you're back. I go, well, yeah, by the way, I got today. And she goes, well, I'll hang out with you. I go, really? And she says, yeah, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to Disneyland. And that's what I want to do.
The happiest place on earth.
So she picked me up and we went down to Disneyland. And I rode Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, I know, at least 10 times. This is when you went to Disneyland, you got the E-ticket rides, the A-ticket, all that. And I remember Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was like a B ticket or a C ticket. So I took mine, and you get like 3 or 4. I took hers. Okay. So and I was just mindless. And it was a great relief. So we spent the day at Disneyland, and that afternoon, and again, I want to talk a little bit about the historical context, and I told you about March 31st being the day that Lyndon Johnson announced that he wasn't going to run for re-election, and a lot had to do because Bobby Kennedy had entered the race, and people's perception about why we were in Vietnam was starting to become challenged. That whole thing that's going on in the summer of 1968. And here's Ricky King in a Disneyland, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, got an airline ticket to go see my mom the next day and my 3 little sisters. And we decided for the last ride of the day to go on the Pirates of the Caribbean, which is it just opened up. That's what I've later learned. And we come out, and when we come out, somebody says, "Here he comes." And I had a camera that I had bought at the Naval Exchange in
No
Da Nang.
tax.
No tax. And about from me to halfway from where I am from you is Bobby Kennedy walking by, and I took a picture of him. And it was taken about 48 hours before he was assassinated.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's crazy.
And a colleague of mine, Jim Rogan, who has since retired, and Judge Rogan, he's retired, and he's an author. He's written books.
He's written some great books. I read his book, was it Rough Edges?
Right.
I love that book.
Well, he wrote a book called On to Chicago, and it's about the presidential elections of 1968. And he did a lot of research. And we had known each other, but I didn't know he was writing the book, and he didn't know about my story in Vietnam. Or in a page, he devotes a paragraph to how Robert Kennedy had promised his kids that Robert Kennedy, would take his kids to Disneyland on that Sunday. Isn't that amazing?
That is. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a small
It really
world.
is. It's a small world.
It really is.
So I went to see my mom, my 3 sisters, saw my dad.
I bet they were thrilled to see you.
Oh, my mom. That's another image. Remember the image of her, and I couldn't get her out of the car? She was at the airport, and she just ran up to me and just started crying and couldn't stop crying.
Yeah, I bet.
No, that's what that was. So I had 30 days leave. I actually went to see my grandfather in West Virginia with my dad, and we had a WW1 vet together, a WW2 vet together, and a Vietnam vet, although I wasn't a vet yet, but been in a conflict. And that was sort of cool.
Yeah.
All right. And then went back to California, and I had to go back to Vietnam for another tour. I didn't volunteer, but remember what I told you, that rule, 12 continuous months. Well, it was silent for broken service, and I don't know if that motivated me 10 years later to go to law school, but I had to go back. And ironically, I went back to the same place with the same job at the same quarry crusher.
Oh, wow.
So that spot in Vietnam, I spent between 13 to 15 months.
Oh my
and I was doing the same thing. Only instead, I was a squad leader. Remember I told you how they're broken down, and I was at the age of 21, I was a squad leader in Vietnam.
Wow.
All right. So, but what happened in between? One of the ones who I put in the body bag, his name was John Peake. He was from Potomac, Michigan. And he was older than most of us. He was in his late 20s. He was married. He had 3 kids. He was in the service, got out of the service, and because of economics, went back into the service. So he left a widow and 3 kids, two young boys and a daughter. But we got to know each other, and for whatever reason, he took a liking to me. He I don't know what the basis was, but I just remember him telling me, don't turn out like me. You can do something. And he was the one that really was planting the seed, maybe unconsciously, that I wasn't going to run a bulldozer the rest of my life. And so obviously his death was very impactful along with the others. And so when I came back in the summer of '68, I checked out because I knew I was wanting to stay in California. And I checked out and found out about the junior college system, which basically is, and I was always concerned about my high school ranking, but it took me a while to figure it out that really all you need is a brain stem and your body exchanging oxygen for CO2 and you will get in, okay? And so I came to that realization, and I was thinking, I wonder, what school? And so at that time, I had an apartment with 2 other Seabees, and we shared a 1959 Pontiac. We had it every 3 days, and it was my day to have the Pontiac. And this is before, again, Google Maps or anything like that. You had these maps that would fold out. And I had all of these catalogs or whatever they're called when the college would send you, their school, and talk all about the classes and what have you. And I had, 10 or 12 of them in the car. And I went to the A&W root beer stand, and I ordered 2 chili dogs and a vanilla float, root beer vanilla float. And I had these maps, and I had these, these items from the college. And one of them said Santa Monica City College. Now, remember what I told you about my good friend Wayne and we were in the trailer, and this whole analysis to go in to the service together was about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, a similar thing happened when I'm in that 59 Pontiac, because I'm going through the catalogs and I see Santa Monica City College. And the first thought in my mind was the Academy Awards, because I used to watch them on TV, and it would say live from the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. And the deduction that I drew was that has got to be a cool place to go to college if they hold the Academy Awards. that was it. So I got the map out, and I figured out that it was like 45 minutes down the road. And I gobbled the chili dogs and got into the car and drove down there. Went to the admissions and talked to a very nice lady, and she suggested that I take this test, and you're going to get in. And I kept on telling her about my high school record because I just didn't think anybody would accept me. And it took her about 5 or 6 times to finally convince me of what I said earlier. And she didn't say it this way, but it was, Richard, all you need is a brain stem exchanging oxygen with CO2. You're going to get in. But she also knew that a lot of veterans were coming back and going to school. And she said, we will write your commanding officer around February, March, that you've been accepted. And that way, when you come back, I still had, when I came back, 4 months to go on my enlistment. It says you may be eligible for an early out. And I go, okay. So I go back to Vietnam, do the same job, same place, came under attack a few times.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah.
Again. Wow.
And in March, mail call. And there's a letter from Santa Monica City College, and I opened it up. I didn't pay particular attention to the first word. It says, you've been provisionally accepted. I just saw the word accepted. And of course, it went on and says, because of your high school, we're going to require, this, and this. But I'm in a camp, and I'm a squad leader too. So the people who I'm in charge of, it's almost like I was a judge. When I tell them something, they're gonna hear what I have to say. They really have no choice, right?
Yes.
And I just couldn't say enough. I'm going to college. And so I got back. I got discharged from active duty. Again, a little historical context. On the day they blasted off for the moon, Apollo 11, is the day I got out of the service.
Wow.
And I had saved some money. I got an apartment in Culver City. I bought a 62 VW green Volkswagen. I had, in the previous summer, I'd learned how to surf. And so I got a surfboard, surf racks. I had an apartment. I had 2 months to go before college. And I had a little cash from saving it up. And I surfed every day from Santa Cruz, Steamers Lane, all the way down south of the border, south of Tijuana, a place called K39, which was a good point break in Mexico. And I'm ready. And I'm ready to start Santa Monica City College. And I did. And I show up, and the first day of classes is an anti-war demonstration.
Oh, my goodness. You're like, are you kidding me? I was all excited for my academia.
And I'm hearing things that I don't want to say they're disturbing, but it was it was just out of sync for me. Out of sync. And from that time, I just hung out with Vietnam vets. There were a lot of Vietnam vets that were in Santa Monica City College. We had a vets club, and that's where I met and hung out. And that's who we hung out with. And I studied. I had discipline. The military turned me around. I had discipline, and I had nobody to care about but me. I had no family, and I had odd jobs, but I studied. And I got good grades, and I was able to transfer to UCLA. And when I got to UCLA, there wasn't that many veterans. All right, a lot of them either dropped out or, pursued other things. But in that process, from Santa Monica City College to UCLA, there were a couple of times that it would come up about my military service. And the war was, although still going on, it was really de-escalating. Mm-hmm. But the people that I would have a conversation with, they weren't from the service. And there was also still fresh in their mind about the anti-war sentiment about the Vietnam War. And I just remember at times that when I would talk and it would come up, I would get this: what'd you do that for? How stupid were you to do that? I mean, you could have gotten out of it. And so I just didn't tell anybody I was a vet after that. I didn't tell anybody I was a vet. And interesting, I grew a beard, grew a ponytail. I got a 60 VW bus. I'm the same person who I am right now, but in the eyes of people there, I was maybe
Hippie?
something different. All right? I'll just fast forward a little bit. It wasn't until 1989 that I went on a skiing trip with a bunch of DAs that I was talking to somebody, and somebody for the first time thanked me for my service.
Wow. That many years later, 20-something years later?
1989.
Oh, my goodness.
So after UCLA, I went to law school, University of San Diego, and I decided to go back to D.C. For my first legal job. And my first legal job was with the Veterans Administration in the Office of the General Counsel. And it was an exciting time. The VA has the largest hospital system in the world, 175 hospitals. And at that time, the bulk of the management in the Veterans Administration were World War II vets. They were in their mid-50s, late 60s, so they're still in the workforce. Congress, like senators, like 78% of the senators were veterans. In the House of Representatives, it was a similar number, all right? And they were mostly World War II vets. But Jimmy Carter, who became president, and he was a veteran, although he did not, he was not in World War II. He was an Annapolis graduate and was in the submarine force. But he was a veteran, and he appointed the first non-World War II veteran to run the Veterans Administration, and his name was Max Cleland. And as a young lieutenant in 1967 or 68, he lost both of his legs and an arm. And he really infused into the Veterans Administration, and I was able to witness this, that the problems were starting to surface about Vietnam veterans, the drug usage, the PTSD, things of that nature. And so he was very instrumental in bringing that to the forefront, okay? And another thing that was going on at that time, the country was forgetting about Vietnam. The war was over. We pulled our last troops out in 1973. People just started forgetting about Vietnam, and perhaps for good reasons.
How many people died in Vietnam?
58,500, something in that number.
And what about in World War II?
World War II, as I remember, it was like 300,000. I think I didn't look that up before that, but it was substantially more than Vietnam. 16 million served in World War II. 16 million.
Wow.
As I said before, 2.7 million served on the ground in Vietnam. So you can just see the demographics are significant, right, between the two. But getting back, the country just wanted to forget about Vietnam, but the veterans couldn't.
How could you?
So there was a gentleman, Jan Scuggs, who was in D.C. He was a Vietnam vet. He was wounded. And he was the motivating force, along with a couple of others, to promote and to build the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And it came of age in 1982. And if I could just take a moment to tell you about it, because it's if you've ever been there, it's pretty moving.
I have been, but I didn't know all the things you're about to tell us. So please tell the listeners. So
it went out on for private bidding. It was all public. It was all private funds, And the contract for the design was awarded to a third-year architectural student from Yale. And her design was black marble. And at that time, most, if not all, of the monuments in D.C. were white. So that caused some controversy. But the second part was that it would have no statements. It would have no statutes, although they did put statutes in later on of some soldiers and nurses. But there were no political statements. There were no statements. It would only be names of those who died. And the thought is we're not going to put the names in chronological order because there were hundreds of Gomez, hundreds of Smiths, Jones.
You mean alphabetical order?
In alphabetical order, I'm sorry. The design was to put them in chronological order.
From the time that they died.
From the time they died. And it was two walls that came together at a 120-degree vortex. And on the right, as you face the vortex, the first name is the first person who died in 1959. And then the names go down the west wall. And then they resume at the end of the east wall, and they come together at the vortex. So the last person who died in Vietnam is next to the first person who died in Vietnam.
Wow.
And the reason for that is that when they died together, they're going to be on the wall together. And so the black marble was there so that a loved one or a comrade or a fellow soldier could go and place their hand on the wall and they can see themselves in the black marble and reflect about the life that you have had and the life that they didn't have.
Wow.
And so it's a very moving.
Yeah, a very powerful statement. Just the intricacies of it.
Right.
The design. I love that.
Right.
I would have never known that. I've been to it and I didn't know that until I heard you say that at that presentation. I was like, oh, wow, I had no idea.
Right.
I love all the little inside scoop on those things. Suppose if I had looked it up, I would have known that. But
so now I think the next event in this story perhaps is 2012.
yeah.
And that was a traumatic event for me. And I want to
Found out you're under attack again, right?
I was under attack again. Where I was in Vietnam was the shortest distance between the South China Sea and the Laotian border. And it was where the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the mouth, went into South Vietnam for all the supplies, troops, ammunition. And that mouth or that trail was bombed by repeated bombing. Well, to make it so they could see it, they defoliated it with the toxin called Agent Orange. And Agent Orange was used throughout Vietnam. And our camp was about 15 to 20 miles from this point. And all of the area up into our camp was being sprayed with Agent Orange. There's maps of the most amount of Agent Orange that was dropped in Vietnam, and it's right where I was. Okay, and it ran down into the water, and so I say this somewhat with some humor, but when we were working and producing this quarry crusher, I mean, we had our M16. We had a helmet by, but we had our shirt off, and we worked in shorts, but there was no suntan lotion. It was 110 degrees from the sun. And in the sea rations, remember I told you they give you cigarettes? So you have no protection from the sun. You're smoking cigarettes, and they're spraying Agent Orange, over around your camp.
Oh my gosh.
All right. So about 15, 20 years ago, the Veterans Administration concluded through medical science and that there was about 6 or 7 cancers that they know was caused or accelerated by Agent Orange, and that number has grown, okay? And I was diagnosed with one of those cancers. And that was in 2012. And when I received that diagnosis, I went through the pity, why me? I was mad, I was sad. The people that get this deadly disease, what you go through. About that diagnosis, I've been treated for it. I get the best health care for it. And the prognosis is that I'm going to die with it, not because of it. But what got me out of it was a realization that I had 50 years of life, that those that I put in those bags, body bags, did not have. I had 50 years of life that Harry Hodges did not have. I had 50 years of life that those Marines at that bridge did not have. So it got me out of it. It got me out of it. And I decided to track down, at least for the Seabees, the relatives, and to meet them and to thank them because of their sacrifice. That's what I decided to do. Just, I felt an obligation, and it was for me. I'm going to say that. So the internet was in play. And so how did I find them? It was the obituaries of the parents. And when you read the obituary, they would say, survived by, and then son-law. I go, that's it. And then I knew who the brothers and sisters were.
Right.
Okay? And of course you can
So
find
you're
it.
doing your own little detective work to figure it out, right?
And you can pretty much find people on the internet. And so I wrote a letter to all of them. And I said, I was at the battle that your loved one died as a hero. I have some documents that I would like to share with you, but if you would like. So I left it up to them, and I gave them my contact info. Everyone contacted me.
Wow. And this is of all the 6 Seabees?
Yeah.
Friends of yours that you lost?
And well, the 2 were real close. I didn't know the others, but I was on that night. I was a litter bearer. You get assigned that, and that means when there's attack, you go retrieve the wounded and dead from their fighting position. So that's who I was. Okay, I was a litter bearer. So as I said, I knew 2 of them. One was John Peake. The other was Jim Retzlaff. He was from Redding, California, and we played on a softball team together. He was an incredible athlete. We talked a lot. He was the one that basically was telling me about the junior college system. All right? And so those are the 2 who I knew. So getting back to the letter, they all contacted me, and I went on a journey. And I met them.
And you traveled all over?
And this, yes, I did. And this is what happened. Remember I told you the firefight in Vietnam is like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it's over, right? And same with the attack, although on a camp, maybe a little bit longer. The helicopter which they did not have in World War II. They had it somewhat in Korea. But the helicopter was pervasive in Vietnam. Remember, I told you about that sound of incoming? I'll never forget that sound. That's one. The other is the helicopter blades. I'll never I mean, when I hear the helicopters that are looking, for people on a crime or whatever, I mean,
It's got to be kind of triggering.
yeah, well, you never forget that
I'm
sound.
not saying you hit the deck or anything,
No.
but you're like, it brings you back to that
It does.
moment.
So the helicopter, after a conflict, a firefight, the bodies were removed, taken to a morgue at one of the larger cities, and within 12 hours are on flights to go back to the hometowns. And of course, none of the firefights are making the newspaper. It's just, how many died, things of that nature. Some of the battles were the Tet Offensive was there, obviously. But most of the time, no. But in World War II, the big battles were always reported. D-Day, Guadalcanal, Battle of the Bulge. Those were in the paper, and people at home knew of that. So can you imagine having this job? You're a casualty notification officer, and you drive out to the parents to tell them that they have lost their son. I mean, can you believe having that job?
No.
Well, the casualty notification officers, by and large, did not know the facts of the battle. They just didn't know. So what happened is that when I met them,
The family members of the Seabees that died,
they didn't know.
they had
That
no
they're-
idea what happened to their loved one.
They knew they're, got the Purple Heart, but they didn't know the facts. And so the first one that I contacted, I mean, you talk about being nervous. We talked on the phone, and he's going to pick me up at this train station. And then I texted him because I'm going to say, well, how does he know who I am? And I told him what I was wearing. Okay. And I walk out, and, I'm standing there, and this truck, like out of National Geographic monster truck, starts coming at me. It stops. The window comes down, and this very lovely lady says, "Are you Rick?" I go, "Well, yeah." And this booming voice says, "Well, get in." And I climb up, and I get in the back, and I know we use Google so much for everything. You can't Google. Well, how are you supposed to react to something like this? So I'm in the back, and I forgot who broke the silence, but thank you for being here. And they took me out to a dinner, and one of them ordered a beer or something. Thank goodness. And I ordered a beer, and we start chatting. And then this is how I approached it. I said, "I was there. I saw your brother die as a hero. I mean, he did die as a hero. And do you want me to talk about it?" And he goes, "Yes." And as I'm talking, he's holding on to his wife, and these crocodile tears are just streaming down his face. And he did not know that his big brother died as a hero, and he was 14 when he lost his brother.
Wow.
So what happened was I went there to thank them, and then they started thanking me, which was something that I had no comprehension about.
Well, I mean, you really are in that moment giving just the information, just the knowing of, what happened to their loved one. when up until that moment they were in the dark about it. Like they had no idea. So the light that you brought to that situation, just to shine the light on it and say, hey, this is what happened to your loved one, is, I think, got to be really, therapeutic in some way to these people who you never know.
Some of them knew, because when we got back, we had a ceremony, and some of the next of kin were there, and this was in '68, and some of those who were there, they reminded me they were there, and but to those that didn't, they really didn't. They didn't know. And so we all decided to go to Vietnam. And we planned a trip, and we coordinated.
You and all the family members.
Yeah, there was, it turned out to be four out of the six. And we decided that we are going to go to the spot on the 50th anniversary and be at the spot where they gave their lives. And so we all came from different airports. We all migrated and landed in Da Nang, that airport that I was in before. I arranged to have a guide and a transport. And the guide that I had, his name was Tang. He was in his mid-40s. His father was in the Viet Cong in the area that I was in. And we became good friends. And we drove on the highway that we widened. And we stayed at a resort. That beach I told you about where we filled sandbags?
Yeah.
It was a 5-star resort.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's where we stayed, as opposed to living in a tent on a cot that had C4 bricks to support it. Okay? And then came the morning.
And was it March 31st?
It was March 31st.
Okay. 50 years later.
50 years later. And we first went to where the Marines were.
The bridge.
The bridge. And it was, they still had the main tower there. So we paid our respects there. And then we, 4 miles up the road, went in. And I couldn't believe it. We had stripped that place. We had made a quarry crusher. There was no vegetation left. We blew half of the mountain up for the rock. The jungle had overtaken the quarry.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was just jungle again. And I had on my iPhone a map that was done of our camp at the time that had locations and distances. And there was a railroad track, and the railroad track was still there. But off in the distance, there was a photo that was taken that I had of 2 points. And we had back then had constructed a monument in 1968, a few days after they died, and took a picture of it. And I could see where that was and where those 2 spots on 2 islands were. And through a little bit of walking things off, we got to the spot. And I think we were pretty close. And we had a little bit of a we had Twinkies. I had a Zippo lighter, some cigarettes without, Chesterfields, and some incense, and we had some flowers there. But I have to share something with you. I was not confident of my ability to speak. Now, I had been in the DA's office. I tried murder trials. I see people all the time, jurors, and I just, I didn't have confidence in myself. I said some things. So one of the persons who was with us, he was 7, and he's very spiritual, and he spoke, and he talked about the quote, about one, no greater love than one to lay down his life for one's friend. And he spoke about those 5 who laid down their lives for their friends in our camp.
Wow.
So that's the story.
That's so beautiful. And I really think it's so true, like to sacrifice your life for someone else. I'm, very faithful, and I believe, that's what Jesus did for all of us, to lay down his life for all of us so that we could have life, eternal life. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's such the ultimate sacrifice that I don't think everyone's willing to make. And so the fact that you were willing to do that, ultimately, you didn't have to, but you've been through a lot. I just want to close a little bit on you and how, having gone through this incredible life, between just making the decision, being in Vietnam, losing friends of yours, and then 50 years later bringing them back to bring them some, just not closure, but just peace about knowing that their loved ones were heroes. I know a lot of veterans, as we're celebrating Veterans Day with these episodes, didn't have the ability to carry on and be as successful as you've become, being a homicide prosecutor and a judge here in Orange County for over 25 years. And in terms of the PTSD and the things that we do see veterans suffering through on a regular basis, how did that not affect your mental health?
Well, I want to comment on that. I don't think I'm anybody special in terms of not suffering from PTSD. I haven't. Okay. And I don't think it's because I'm some stronger person. I, for whatever reason, I haven't. Okay. Others have. And I really don't. I don't think it's a function of how strong you are. I think a lot has to do with variable circumstances. So, but it was out there, and it's still out there. But the important thing, I think, that I want to take away with is that there was a time in the late 60s, early 70s, where the way that Vietnam veterans were treated was different than they were treated now. Abraham Lincoln, 6 weeks before he was assassinated, and he was, the war is about ready to end. The most major conflict we've ever had. I mean, a lot of people died in that war, both on the North and in the South. And his statement, which is inscribed in the Lincoln Memorial, as you look at him on the right side, on the left side is the Gettysburg Address. On the right side is his second inaugural address at that time, about 6 weeks before he was assassinated. And in that, he knew on both the North and the South that veterans were coming home and they needed care. And so he said the famous words, "To care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan." Now, it should be changed now to care for those who shall have borne the battle. But he knew. And we had that message at the end of World War II. We had that message now for the wars that we have had in the Gulf. We have that. But there was a time in the late 60s, early 70s, that Vietnam veterans wondered if those words still had meaning. And I just leave, and I've said this before, our country is a great country. The country gave me opportunities. You talk about somebody who graduated 100 from the bottom of his class and was able to do the things. It has to do with our country. It has to do with it. And veterans, when they take that oath, when they enter, They take an oath to do the Constitution. But, it's a little different than being a prosecutor when you take that oath and you're trying to present evidence in front of a jury. It's a little different than when you're a judge and you're upholding the Constitution by rules. I mean, they're putting their life, and their life can be sacrificed. And it's very real to a veteran who had been in war when you put a friend in a body bag. You know that the price of freedom is not free. And so I'm comfortable, I'm at peace that we are today. You can protest against the war, but don't protest against the warrior who will give up his or her life so that you can protest against the war. That, I'm confident, is where we are now.
Wow. I don't think you could have said that any better. Amen to that. Well, I want to thank you. How many years later is it? 50 something, right? A long time ago. I want to thank you for your service. And thank you for sharing this incredible story. I was just as blown away by it tonight as I was when I heard you present that at that Orange County Bar Association event. And so I'm so happy that all of our listeners got to hear the story and just bring a little bit of awareness to our veterans, especially right now on Veterans Day, while we're celebrating the sacrifice that all of these young men and now young women give for our country. And it is a beautiful thing that we live in this, that we live in the United States and that we have people that are willing to give up their lives for our freedoms. And we should never, ever forget that or underestimate the power of that sacrifice, and that you're right, freedom is not free. So God bless you and thank you. And I am so happy and glad that you were able to help those families and be such a light in the darkness for them. And that's why I asked you to come on the show, because it fits right in tune with our podcast, Being the Light.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was an honor and a privilege for me. So thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. So I guess until we meet again, if you can't find the light, be the light like the Honorable Ricky King. Is it okay that I called you that?
Sure.
This is my courtroom right now. Anyway, thank you so much. That was such a treat. And I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did. And until we meet again, so long now. See you next time.
Shine so bright.